Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Success Insight podcast. Our guest today is Kate Solis Silva and Ulises Silva. Kate is a professional career transitions and personal development coach. She helps people connect deeply to themselves and stop settling and move forward with confidence so they can do the work they love. And Ulysses is an author of science fiction. Ulysses says that his work is accompanied by a side of absurdist humor and possibly a dash of apocalyptic glee. Ooh, that's interesting. His two novels include Solstice and The Perfect Teresa. Now, besides being husband and wife, they are also the parents to one cat. Kate and Ulysses, welcome to the Success Insight podcast.
Thank you so much for having us, Howard.
Thank you, Howard.
This is like a marriage made in heaven here. And I mean, figuratively speaking, you guys are married, but in the spirit of full disclosure, Kate and I do know each other because we are both professional coaches. We have a specialty in career transition and personal development. And I remember we were at an event, and as Kate usually does, because she's such a nice person, says, Howard, how are you? What's new? What's going on? Because we probably only see each other maybe once or twice a year. And I said, well, I'm having a lot of fun with my podcast. And she asked, well, who are your guests? And I said, we do a lot of book authors. And she said, Ulysses, she said, my husband's a book author. And I thought, well, heck, we ought to get him on the podcast. And in fact, why don't we have both of you on the podcast? Because this is going to make for a great conversation. And so here we are. Kate, I would love if you could just share a little bit about your work and your journey into coaching, because you've had a quite a variety of background. I mean, it's kind of like my resume in a way, but share a little bit about how you got into the coaching profession.
Yeah, so I'm glad you noted a winding road on my LinkedIn profile, Howard, but throughout all the twists and turns, the theme is connection. Where I found my start with coaching was actually as a client. I was in my second career evolution and put all my eggs in that basket and was really expecting that career to be the end-all be-all for me. And a couple years into it, realized that it wasn't. And after quite a period of analysis paralysis, there was a presentation given from the Career Transition Center of Chicago to the nonprofit that I worked at for program participants. But lucky enough, I happened to be in the room and thought, maybe I need to check that out myself. And so after experiencing coaching on my own, I realized that I was feeling the spark to pursue it professionally. And so decided to do that a few years back. And since getting my professional certification, I have not looked back. Since that time, I have specialized in the area of, as you touched on, career transitions and personal development. So going through a change, especially in mid-career, is a big undertaking, and oftentimes it can be pretty overwhelming. So having done that walk myself and being able to support clients in that capacity, both with the internal work that needs to be done and the external work that takes place to make a career shift, is something that I'm really passionate about.
Fantastic. And I can truly appreciate aspects of your journey. And as I like to share, I'm a recovering IT business consultant. And I just remember, why am I always miserable like about a week after a new project starts? And I think it was because the same old thing is happening project after project. And I also realized I was part of the problem anyways. and that's when I discovered I needed a new profession. So you and I are definitely in the right place. And so Ulysses, share a little bit about yourself. I mean, how did you become an author? And what was part of that journey?
Thanks, Howard. I became an author really by accident. I really had been writing on and off since I think I was in grade school. Okay. And it wasn't until grad school. Yes, grade school to grad school. In grad school, instead of like working on my dissertation or whatever, I started writing anime fanfics And before I knew it, I had like amassed 300 pages of this, really what essentially ended up being my first novel. What I also realized was that people were reading it and they were enjoying it, despite the fact that it was really badly written and it was very apocalyptic, very, very dark. But that's kind of how I realized, hey, wait a minute, I like writing. People apparently like what I'm writing, and I think I want to do this more. So I've always been a fan of science fiction. I've always been a fan of speculative fiction, which is kind of a fusion of science fiction and fantasy elements. And so in 2007, I published my first book called Solstice, which is about people who can make anything they write come true. So published that. And then my next novel, I didn't publish a novel for like many years. I published my second novel, The Perfect Teresa, in, I think, 2017. And that was kind of going more into where I'm going now, which is a mixture of humor and science fiction and a lot of time travel elements. But I just love science fiction. I love how it allows us to kind of take the everyday and just ask questions like, what if this one thing were a little bit different? And, what if you could meet an unemployed Aztec god who could send you back to 1988? What would that be like? That's why I love being an author.
An unemployed Aztec god. Okay. I don't necessarily know I want to go back to the 1980s. I don't know. I don't know where I would go back if I was to. There are certain events I would like to go back to, but I don't know. I mean, there's probably. Okay, now that I'm thinking about it, there are some things I would go back. And Kate, would you go back if you could be the character in Ulysses' book? Would you go back?
Oh, gosh. Well, there was some fun that happens in The Perfect Teresa for sure, sparked my interest. It's not something I had necessarily considered previously, but to especially relive some of the nostalgia that really sticks with you for the rest of your life and to experience that 2.0, I think that would be really fun. And knowing that there's some personal connections for Ulysses in that book, just being able to experience that a second time around is pretty special.
Fair enough. Speaking of the two of you, I mean, you're married. You have a little fluffy four-legged child. I always joke I'm the uncle to a white ball of fluff. He's like a 45-pound Samoyed. He visits a couple times a year, but he stays forever because his hair is still here.
Yep.
How did you two meet? I mean, let's just keep it PG rated. I think we could do that. But how'd you two meet?
Well, it really is kind of like a different version, depending on who you ask. My version is that we were working for partner organizations in Detroit, and I was giving a presentation on behalf of mine. At the end of this presentation, Kate approaches me and very touchy-feely says, "Hey, that was great. Can I get a business card?" And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, this amazingly beautiful woman is hitting on me. And that was kind of the start of, my pursuit. Kate tells it a little bit differently.
So the long and short of it is I'll say that we are a nonprofit love story.
Okay.
I was serving a year of AmeriCorps in Southwest Detroit and happened to cross paths with Ulysses. And after some courtship that I wasn't quite frankly aware of for some point in time, once we did get together, it was a wonderful experience.
Fantastic. And had you been aware of Ulysses' writing and his love for science fiction and absurdist humor, apocalyptic glee, so to speak? Were you aware of that? Or how did he introduce that to you?
So on our first date in Detroit, we went for a walk along the riverfront and then went to go grab a bite to eat. And during that time, I was sharing my connection to the greater good and all the ways that I wanted to impact the world. And he switched the conversation to, oh, and by the way, that's my 9 to 5, but in the evenings, I'm moonlighting as a writer. And this is the type of topics that I'm really interested in. And so that's how I became aware of Ulysses wearing 2 hats.
Maybe I should have saved that for a third date in retrospect. I think it might have been a lot.
Perhaps. So Ulysses, as you went from having the job to writing, when did you realize I want to devote my attention to this, my energies to the writing?
It's funny you asked that because I think when I first started writing, it was just I'm doing it. It's something I want to do, kind of like a bucket item list. But it really wasn't until Kate and I were together and she became a coach and she kind of started talking to me about writing that I really kind of discovered that this is what I want to do. That yes, I go to work every day, 9 to 5. I work at a bank. But when I come home, I first and foremost, I guess I introduce myself as a writer whenever people ask, oh, what do you do? And it's in large part thanks to Kate, because really she was the one who, during a coaching session, because as her husband, I get, some coaching here and there, which I am pretty happy about.
She's testing out material on you? Is that what she's doing?
Pretty much. But she asked me, very recently, she even asked me a very simple question in the middle of what I was going through, like a very, deep creative block. And she asked, well, why do you write? What do you want out of writing? What do you love about writing? And she really forced me to kind of face that and realize I love writing because I love telling stories. I love telling my stories. I love that as writers, we have control over whatever story we want to say, no matter how silly. Like I said, unemployed Aztec gods. I mean, really, it was Kate who kind of helped me realize that this was my passion, that this was what I wanted to really do for the rest of my life. And it's now something that I'm aiming for to do full time someday in the future. Okay.
When you are writing, I mean, what are you learning about yourself as you are on this journey? So if I understand it now, you still have the job in the bank, but what are you learning about yourself and your capacity to be creative and to be disciplined to writing a book? Because that's what I found, and I hear that from a lot of writers. It's discipline, it's consistency, it's maybe there is a block, but you still have to write. Whether it's 50 words or 500 words, what are you finding about yourself and being disciplined and being consistent?
Well, first off, the thing that I found out about myself is that I'm nuts, and that my coworkers would probably be scared of me if they even knew half of the things I'm thinking about while I'm working. Joking aside, I think one of the things I really love about writing is how it lets you talk to other people, not just telling stories, but really, every time I mention to somebody, almost to the letter, yeah, I do. I write books. It's the reaction is almost always, oh my God, that's amazing. I want to write a book too. I just don't think I can. And so one of the things I've learned is that I really love having these conversations with people about taking that plunge. Go ahead and write. If it's what you want to do, don't tell yourself that you can't. It's a lot of work. It does require a lot of discipline, but it can be done. I think that's what I've discovered most about myself, is that not only do I love telling these stories, but I kind of discovered a knack for getting other people to tell theirs. And I think that's Kate's influence as well, FYI.
And that's actually a really good segue, because I'm thinking about this in the career transition space. I mean, Kate goes through this every time she's working with a client. Her clients, for whatever reason, they're either doing something that they don't want to do or have lost the love in it, or they're involuntarily, maybe through no fault or no fault, they're out of a job, and now we have an opportunity for a new discovery. So, Kate, in terms of telling the story with your clients, how is Ulysses' journey? How does that resonate for some of the things you're seeing, hearing, doing with your clients?
Yeah, this is a great topic, actually. And the word that comes to mind for me, actually, Howard, is practice. And so looking at this as a practice, and for people that are stepping into a space of uncertainty, a little bit of unknown, starting to take some baby steps and building a practice around that. So you touched on the discipline and the commitment, but working with clients to support them and continuing to take baby steps to move forward, but keeping it as a consistent practice.
When you're working with your clients and say Ulysses is, okay, he's come home from the job, I'm going to be 2 hours. By the way, Ulysses, do you have the man cave somewhere where you go off and do your writing? Or are you like, kitchen table and Kate is doing her work right next to you, with the cat comfortably in the middle?
It's quite literally, it's kind of like a man cave, but it's more like, I think my brother called it like a little cub cave. Basically, it's a converted furnace room with a little desk in there. So yeah, I do have my little writing space, but sometimes, yeah, we'll be working together in the living room. She's working on her stuff, I'm working on mine, and yeah.
Do you guys bounce ideas off of each other? And I love for you both to answer this question. We'll start with Kate, but when you're doing your work, Kate, I mean, you're an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. We're both, for the most part, we're on our own. We have our programs, we have our tools, we know who our ideal clients are. When you have questions or you're kind of, you're writing some materials for your work, do you bounce ideas off of Ulysses? Because, I mean, he's the professional writer here.
All the time. So yes, I mean, entrepreneurship is, for myself up until this point, a one-man band, but it has been really, really awesome to have Ulysses as a partner in this capacity as well. And so, yes, my first and foremost offering is that I'm a coach, but along with that is really starting to dip my toes more into creating content. And so I look to my husband now as a writing coach for myself, because I actually do enjoy the practice, and I am starting to become more disciplined and consistent around it. But I look to him for guidance, his opinion, his wisdom in the area often. And so I am constantly checking in with him, not only for content, but then also how does it resonate with him? He's made a career transition in his mid-career as well. Does it speak to him?
And Ulysses, what are your thoughts on, you're sitting down in the Cub Cave, you've got to do some writing, you're bouncing some new ideas down on paper, and you reach a question, an impasse. What does Kate's input look like for you? I mean, she's got this skill, the coaching, to ask great questions. What's the influence that she's having on you as a writer?
On the one hand, sometimes I will bounce a completely absurd idea off of her. Like, Kate, does it make sense that penguins would be carrying around machine guns? Does that resonate with you? And of course, she'll be like, and I'm afraid of you. But where she really has added so much value to me as a writer is, again, just kind of making me simplify, like, why I do writing. What's the passion behind it? And more than anything else, Kate has really helped me just relieve the pressure off myself, because I was one of those people who, I'm not a perfectionist, but I was like with the mindset of, this novel has to be great. It's got to be really good. The novel I'm working on now, I've been working on it for 2 years. I've rewritten it like 3 or 4 times. And last year I just stopped and was ready to give it up. And after talking with Kate, she was the one who kind of made me realize that, you know what, it doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to even be good. Just write it. Just write it. Let it be. Let other people decide if it's good or not. And she also kind of made me realize that at the end of the day, if this is what brings you joy, if this is what brings you pleasure, if the stories you write are making you smile, well, then just write what you want to write and don't worry about it being great. So I think that's been my greatest takeaway, and certainly what's keeping me going now as I continue on draft like 67 of this one novel that I know now will be completed this year.
Fantastic. So I'm curious, when, we just ended the holidays and perhaps you were at some, friends' parties, or maybe you went to dinner and you're waiting for the table up by the bar or somewhere, and people start a conversation with you too, and they say, we introduce each other. And someone says to Kate, what do you do? And Kate says, here's what I do. What does your husband do? So Kate, how do you describe what your husband does?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. So, and I also will echo what he has shared before, in that he is an author. He's a writer first and foremost. And really leading with that, the other stuff doesn't really matter, frankly. And I, as someone who, it's so interesting that we got paired. We are A and Z on so many things. And coming to this relationship, I think I've watched 1, maybe 2 science fiction shows in my entire life. And so for me to be able to introduce, when they say, oh, well, what does he write? And I say speculative fiction. Now, at least I can explain it's science fiction and fantasy together. So I've got that part down. So I'm learning the genre as I go too. But you know what? He's like he said, it's lighthearted. It's a mix of fun with a little bit of fantasy and science fiction elements, but it's a really good read.
I love it. So Ulysses, how do you describe Kate?
I love that question too, because honestly, when somebody asks me about what she does, I love talking about her. Basically, I say to them, she is a coach. She helps people kind of like gain the confidence they need to make that whatever move they want to make. And I often say, and you know what, I can attest to it because I was one of her customers. I was doing marketing for 17 years and just feeling so unfulfilled by it. I was doing it because it's what I knew how to do and that I was kind of good at, but not necessarily anything I enjoyed. And Kate was the one who coached me and made me realize that I could make a change. Yes, I wanted to go into retail banking for some reason, and I didn't think it made sense. I didn't think I could, but she gave me that confidence, and now I'm a lot happier than I ever was in 17 years of marketing. So I always there's a swell of pride when I'm able to tell people that's what my wife does for other people, and she is amazing at it.
As a couple, both of you are in what I would call creative, artistic professions. There's some people would say, coaching is a science, and there is some science to it. We have some rigor around assessments and psychometrics, the personality instruments we might use. But we do say, part of coaching, it's an art to really have a good conversation with your client. And in Ulysses, there's probably some element of science to the rigor of writing, how you create the sentence and craft the hero's journey and how they go through the challenges they're going through and who's there for them. But it's an art. You're an artist. And so what do you two, who are similar yet different paths, what advice do you give to other couples who are navigating this? We have two very different careers here. I mean, it's not like you both are attorneys in corporate law or both working for banks. What advice do you have for other couples who are navigating this kind of relationship?
A word that comes to mind for me is just like incredible support of one another. It takes a ton of courage to put yourself out there in any creative or artistic endeavor. And so knowing that you've got a cheerleader and a champion when you come home to do this, because you may still have a 9-to-5, makes all the difference. And also, Ulysses is incredibly smart. And so to know that I can call on him for his expertise in writing as well is huge for me. So having that champion, having that person that can encourage you when at times it feels like when you're running this marathon, right? You need to know that someone's going to give you a high five along the way, bring you water. But then also looking at each other as colleagues and making sure that I'm tapping into his expertise as well.
Fantastic. And Ulysses?
My advice to other couples is that on paper, Kate and I, like she said, we're A and Z. I'm into science fiction. She's into not science fiction. I think she conflates Star Trek and Star Wars on a fairly consistent basis. So on paper, we don't seem like we have a lot in common, but at the end of the day, we did find a lot of common ground and a lot of mutual support. And the fact is that I would much rather have somebody like Kate be a cheerleader to me and be supportive and encouraging me when I'm in the dregs of writer's block than to have someone who, I love Marvel movies, I love DC, I love whatever. It's much more important to have, like Kate said, that cheerleader in your corner, that person who is going to run the marathon with you every step of the way and be unconditionally supportive. So like her, I guess my advice is don't focus so much on those differences and focus on the fact that you do have mutual respect, mutual support. You are each other's biggest fans, and you absolutely you want to embrace that, because not every marriage has that, and every marriage should. I mean, that's why you get married, right? You want to marry your best friend. You want to marry your biggest supporter. And I got extremely lucky. I married my best friend. I married the best thing that ever happened to me.
Fantastic. So I am curious, one question. Who brought the cat to the relationship?
Kate.
All right, just checking. But I did notice on the part of the notes in preparation, he cuddles with the cat while you're binge watching Netflix. I'm like, oh, okay.
I don't blame him. He puts in some time with, our trashy show choices are a little bit different. So It's fair.
Okay. Gotcha. So I have to ask too, have you watched The Mandalorian yet?
I am on episode 4 or 5 of it. Still haven't convinced Kate to watch it with me, but I keep telling her, I think there's romance in there, so you should probably watch it with me.
Fantastic. I actually watched it twice. I enjoyed it. I've never really been a huge, I have to go see the next Star Wars movie or Star Trek movie, the week it came out or the day. I mean, I'll get to it when I get to it, but I have to admit, in my binge watching over the holidays, I enjoyed it. Kate, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your coaching work, where are the best places for them to go?
They can find me on my website, www.katesolisilva.com. I am Kate Solis Silva on LinkedIn to connect those dots of that winding road that you noted at the beginning of the podcast. And then I'm also Kate Solis Silva on Instagram.
Fantastic. And I would love to another time talk about how you're using Instagram, because I just got on Pinterest, posting our show notes there as well, and which is okay, that's interesting. We will definitely put the backlinks to your LinkedIn, Instagram, and your website in our show notes. And Ulysses, I know Twitter might be a little off. Maybe we're not going to tell people you have a Twitter account, but in any case, I really did want to. I really, to our listeners, what I really wanted to do is jettison this whole interview format and just go through Ulysses' Twitter feed, because that was funny.
Oh, man.
But Ulysses, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where's the best place for them to go?
Best place right now is my website, www.ulisesilva.com. That includes links to my books on Amazon and to that aforementioned Twitter account at Zombies and Tacos, if you must know.
I think that's perfect, by the way, Zombies and Tacos. I love that.
And ironically, Kate came up with that. So again, you talk about just mutual support. But yeah, that's where you'll find me.
Fantastic. Well, Ulysses, Kate, I want to thank you both for joining me on the Success Insight podcast. It's definitely a little variation from what we typically do on our podcast, but it was very enjoyable. I hope the experience was good for you too as well.
No, this has been a blast. Thanks so much, Howard.
It's been a lot of fun, Howard. Thank you for having us on your show. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. All right, folks, we have just been chatting with Kate Solis Silva and her husband, Ulises Silva. Kate is a professional coach and specializing in career transition and personal development. And Ulysses is a author of science fiction and what was that word? How did you describe that again?
Speculative fiction.
Speculative fiction. I hope you do get a chance to go out and check Kate's website as well as her LinkedIn profile, and also check out Ulysses and his website and his Twitter feeds. And of course, like we do with all episodes, we will share the links on our show notes. So I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Do let us know what you think. Please visit successinsightpodcast.com. You can put comments there. We have Success Insight Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and now Pinterest. And also we have our YouTube channel as well. So wherever your venue of choice is for listening to podcasts, my God, even Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, everywhere, folks. Let us know what you think about the podcast, about the other episodes. And if you've got questions for us or want to come onto the podcast if you'd like, do let us know. So, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Success Insight Podcast. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.